This is where my family was born. Give it maybe a few decades and they'd move to Australia, and that's when I entered this world. Since I was a child, I've always loved my white heritage. We conquered the world, built the most successful civilizations, but something felt off. Why do all these people hate us all of a sudden? The newspapers berate us for our heritage, the elites don't want us to have jobs, and the world seems to be against us. Well, this is why, despite everything, I love my white heritage. So I know this may seem like a very controversial topic, because let's be real, I felt pretty cowardice when I was going to make this video, right? I was like, what will people think of me if I talk about this? But this is important, okay? This is very important. There's a reason all these different, let's say, the news or these media companies, even the government, there's a reason why they say all this stuff about you. They don't want you to have one of the most powerful things in this life. And I'm not kidding when I say that. Okay, one of the most powerful things. To show you how powerful this is, let me talk about my story. So when I was a child, I've always loved my heritage, right? I had a bunch of small English flags in my room. I still have one of them just sat there above the vinyl player. And I'd always feel so much pride when I'd think of my people's achievements, right? Just think about it. The British Empire formed the most successful societies. The Americans, the Australians, the Canadians, the Kiwis, what's not to love about that? But as time went on, it started to become so difficult for me to just express this part of me, right? That sounds so feminine, but like, for example, around 2020, remember when the newspapers would be like, check your white privilege and all this garbage? I remember during that time, I kind of felt a lot of I guess you can say insecurity or maybe a bit of cowardice. I spoke out about the issue back then, don't get me wrong, but it made me feel worse because these people were just telling me that, my people are the spawn of Satan and all that kind of stuff. And this form of hatred, it hasn't gone away. In fact, it's gotten worse. You'll be surprised by how much people have this weird chip on their shoulder when it comes to the whites, right? When they're thinking about us. And it's very agitating. However, there's a reason I'm talking about this to you. So let's go back to your ancestors, right? Your ancestors 100 years ago. On this channel, I made a community post, right? And it was about identity, since right now we're at an identity crisis, okay? People forgot who they were. Back then, your ancestors had a model for their identity, right? They had 3 different things that they identified by. The first was their religion, could be Christianity, could be even a denomination like Anglicanism. The second was their ethnicity, English, Anglo-Saxon, Slavic, whatever. And the third was their nationality, the country they lived in. This is actually so powerful, you don't understand. When you start living by this model of identity, right, you start to just become a very unstoppable and strong person in a way. Let me tell you why. Back then, the reason why your ancestors fought so much brutal wars, like literally the 7 Years' War, World War II, World War I, the Vietnam War, the Napoleonic Wars, all these different conflicts, and they were brutal. We all know that. But there's a reason they went in there with such strength and vigor. And it's because they wanted to defend the thing they loved most, their country and their people and God. And they were facing death, okay? They could have been blown into pieces, which a lot of them were. But now, what if you do that, right? You have this kind of attachment to your heritage and your ethnicity. Well, here's what happened. When I started to feel a lot more prideful about where my ancestors came from, I felt, first of all, the strongest sense of pride I've ever felt. And no, this isn't, the bad kind of pride where it's a sin. This is the pride you would get where you're just happy, gratefulness, One of the things I'm most grateful for is just being Anglo-Saxon and being a part of this heroic people group who did all these different things, And when I think about the fact that I'm related to those people, it makes me happy. That's one thing, pride. The second is very interesting, okay? With your ancestors, not only did they feel so much pride about their ethnicity, they also fought for their ancestors, right? The people from the past, okay? For example, if your great-great-grandfather in Victorian England, if he had to fight for his country and he had his ancestor from maybe Viking England or England during the Civil War, if that dude was next to him and he was refusing to go into war, he would be berated by his ancestor, scolded, essentially. So why don't you do that now? And no, I'm not saying go into war and get drafted, okay? That's not what I'm saying. What if, do this, okay? You're sat at your computer, you're being lazy, and you have a task in front of you, right? You want to make a new video. Now imagine that, but with your ancestor, right? Let's say you're French, okay, and you have like your ancestor from the 100 Years' War. If he was in that room and you were being lazy, oh man, he would not be happy. He wouldn't. So of course you'd be more honorable towards your ancestors, and that's very important because when you start acting in honor, you get more done. Okay, you just get more done. You start to be more brave. You start to be more courageous. And of course, we're not perfect. We'll make mistakes and we'll end up betraying our ancestors sometime. When you act in that way, you become a lot stronger. And here's the thing, even if you're not convinced, your heritage still makes you who you are. Okay, you can't change that. Your line of thinking came from your people. So why not embrace it, my friends? It's completely normal. So never surrender your heritage, okay? Don't listen to these morons who tell you that, oh, you should surrender your white privilege. Always love your ethnicity and the person that you are. And I'm not talking about, satanic self love where you're like obsessed over yourself. No, I'm talking about loving your heritage. Okay. Always fighting for what your ancestors built up. And always remember that if you want to have a lasting legacy, the best thing you can do is preserve your ancestry. Okay. Preserve your heritage. And you might say, but you can't control what your great, great, great grandson will do. You can't control what he's going to do. You might die or whatever. Well, are you going to die? Are you going to fumble the bag? Your ancestry is so important. And I don't want you, abandoning it because some moron, loony hooligan or whatever. Why am I using that word? Some moron told you, oh, surrender your white privilege, In fact, I wish I got that message back in 2020, but there's a reason why I'm saying this on a self-improvement channel, okay? This needs to be etched into your brain. People need to realize how important their heritage is. And same as nationality, right? I'll do a quick rant until I eventually just close this video off, but I remember in 2022 with the Tate craze, telling you to move to Dubai because the West is garbage, whatever. That is very retreatist. Don't do that. You should be fighting for your country, not for your government, but for your country. And I highly encourage you to abandon this mindset where you're kind of just fleeing from your ancestors and to just embrace it. That's what I've done. And I hope you do that too. Okay, keep never quitting, my friends.